produce. They had those periods where they produced nothing, and then they produced a bunch. And that's the kind of energy that I think is the most, that's the takeaway from the book. I think that was the most impactful to me.
Brilliant. You know, with this epidemic that we're dealing with, or I guess pandemic that we're dealing with, it is forcing us to look at the flaws in capitalism and the flaws in that masculine energy holding so much space in business. It is not healthy unless it's a temporary stretch when you got it, like you said, you got a crazy week or it's not so for this month or whatever. But the idea is to not work yourself from morning till night, because what you're doing is you're pushing yourself to that thin space we were talking about, where then you become emotionally stressed and things get to you more and you become burnout. It's not healthy to be in that space. You can't be industrious and ingenious when you're run so thin or overwhelmed. So yes, the yin and the yang require a go, 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 and then a rest. Some of the best athletes that I worked with in Boulder, I'm a body worker, have been for damn near 20 years. The best athletes that I worked on that were still in their 60s and 70s doing their skill, and maybe they weren't at they were not doing it at the velocity they were at the peak, of course, but they're still climbing or running or whatever it is that they're doing. And I ask them, I'm like, normally people burn themselves and injure themselves so bad by the time that they're your age that they can't even do this anymore. What are you doing? And both of these 70-year-olds had, maybe they were late 60s, had the same answer. You have to take time off. People get addicted to the heights that they get with the adrenaline. And then before you know it, they're climbing morning, noon, and night, for example, not giving their body a chance to rest, not giving it time to acclimate, and then they go in and injure themselves, and then they put themselves out. It's best to rest. Make yourself even take time off, because that's when we can allow ourselves to rest, get the downslide of the yang and into the yin, and then our mind can start to bring forth the subconscious side of it, so to speak, and then we can get ingenious ideas. For example, if Tesla were a workaholic, he probably wouldn't have downloaded so much great information, because there would have been no room for it. So allow yourself the downtime, because it is productive, necessary, required, and it gives your mind a chance to bring in incredible creative ideas. I bring in my best ideas when my head is clear. I don't bring in any ideas when I'm spun out and stressed out. All I can think about is the stress or whatever. So it is important to get that yin energy. And when I lived in Boulder and I worked on all of these athletes, they had a spiritual sense to them too. So I would say you can keep your yang, just implement yin. Take it like it's a supplement. If you like to run 7 miles a day every day, go ahead, but make sure that you're not going on that 7-mile walk at the end after dinner that you like to do too. Just rest or relax. Don't completely overdo it. So it was a real hard pill for real energetic and workaholic people to swallow, that they had to, and by had to, I mean, you know, when you're 50 and your second broken hip because you run too much, you know, this is, or, you know, hip replacement, you know, that's your body saying you can't handle what you're doing to it, so you have to back off. So all kinds of pills people are swallowing and supplements people are swallowing in learning how to balance that passion as well as finding other outlets. It's tricky because I like to fall into my work and I can definitely get stuck there, but I have to pull myself out, go do some dishes, make a meal. I'm also a human and have to do those things too. I prefer to keep my nose in my work and not do that stuff.
Oh, totally. She also said something that kind of relates to that. She's like, a lot of the, she didn't use the word light worker, but that's kind of what's coming to mind. We're not overly comfortable in our skin suit to begin with. Like we're not used to having restrictions and having to eat. We're not used to having this, you know, time bound, you know, like that's not what our souls are, you know, eternal. And they are energy, and they, you know, incarnate in planets that don't have the same rules as, you know, as ours. And so it doesn't always sit well that we have to, you know, play by the rules of Earth. And unfortunately, that means that we burn out. We can't go forever. You know, yes, you can drink, you know, coffee and you know, use stimulants or however you wanted to to do it, to get yourself to kind of keep going. But that's not the point. That's going against what it means and, is required to be human. And that means, for all the peaks, you need to have a valley.
Do you think that, and this is just your personal opinion, or you can use your professional opinion too, do you think that the cost of brick and mortar rentals are going to go down significantly simply because of the lack of business that people can take in? Even 5 years from now, we might be up to 100% mass again, but I don't know if we will be. And I've been getting psychic hits, if you will, that if I wanted to start brick and mortar again ever, just to hold space, and that the prices will look a little bit better than they have been, because that's often why I've shied away lately with brick and mortar, is that overhead is incredible. It's just really heavy. So in your opinion, or have you heard anything, or what do you just think in general? Or it could be even nothing about that, but what do you think?
Yeah, I think if I merge kind of my own intuition with what I understand about the economy and the levers at play with my assumptions about the future, that there will be an adjustment period. There will have to be a time where there's going to be empty storefronts that need bodies, they need businesses in them, and whether or not that happens will depend on whether or not they can meet businesses where they're at. And so they will likely, in some markets, not all markets, I don't think, like Amazon functions in a few cities around the country, and they are making more money now than ever. And so they're going to keep, right, so they're going to keep probably some prices, real estate high in those areas. But I think that there will be some parts of the country that they're going to lose a lot of people. The loan process through this whole epidemic was a shit show. It was terribly executed. It didn't fit the needs of many, if not most, of the businesses that required the assistance. And so some of the businesses that needed it most probably wouldn't qualify for the lending, and therefore they'll have to shut their doors. And so what goes in there after this is kind of the question. And my fear is that, like, a lot of the small restaurants and mom and pop places, boutiques, like, they won't have been able to survive. And so what will happen is we'll see more of the large chains, the people that never really had to close because they were already takeout only, carry out only, had more savings in the coffer. Maybe they qualified for better or more government loans. They'll come in and replace kind of the smaller businesses that make a community, in my opinion.
That's a bummer, too, in my opinion. I don't mind there being choices for big box stores and what have you, but what I don't want to see are all franchises and that type of institution running all the businesses. I like seeing mom and pop. Maybe after everything acclimates a little bit more, we can kind of get a leg back up on that. But yeah, I would prefer to have a mom and pop coffee shop to go to as opposed to a Starbucks. But if Starbucks is all we have for a couple of years until we acclimate, then I guess that's what's going to happen. But I want to talk a little bit in the last few minutes here about how much more beneficial and productive that feminine energy is in business than the masculine. And definitely the masculine moves things, right? There's movement, it's happening, it's very productive, it's very bold, it's gotten things done, and it's attractive. But what it isn't is sustainable. You run yourself out, or it tops out, and I feel like we are in late stage capitalism now where it just couldn't hold itself up. It ran its course, or it imploded on itself. And that's great, I guess, because I come here to break down the patriarchy, but I don't like to see things damaged and people hurt and what have you. But there is going to be acclimation time for us to kind of flip this over. But the reason I feel like the feminine is so much more productive, not only because it's actually sustainable and can keep going, but when you have ease and grace with your work, you really don't run your nervous system into the ground very often. You are kind to your adrenal glands. You're kind to the organs in your body. You have more breath. And I feel like when we have more breath and we're more patient and grounded, I feel like not only can we get more done, but we're happy to get more done, and the energy has changed. So now we're coming in as opposed to swords wielding, and guns flaring. We're coming in with ease and grace and ice and magic, as opposed to the heat and the fire. And with that ease and grace, everyone feels more comfortable. We're getting probably just as much done, but with more ease and grace, so we're not running our nervous systems into the ground. Americans have extreme heart disease. That's part of our diet, but also the stress and how we run ourselves so much. We'll probably be able to get a real nice handle on some of that stress-related heart disease by simply just leaning feminine. We don't have to flip all the way over to the other side. I wouldn't even recommend that either.
Well, you can't you can't.
You can't.
That's the thing. It's all about balance, right?
Yep.
You couldn't even totally take a feminine energy approach.
Right, and I've heard of civilizations where that was a reality, as the feminine went too heavy over on the other side, and the masculine came in, and then now we're kind of fighting for balance now. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. It's just fun to think about a Amazon feminine civilization that was, in charge. It's fun to think about that. But no, it is. It's more of the balance. And I think that typical feminists get that bad rap of being kind of like that feminazi. And I'm like, no, a feminist isn't a man-hater, just simply wants equality. And I think that, again, the feminists get a bad rap for being edgy and kind of going against the grain, when indeed not all of them act in that Nazi manner. That's called a man-hater, and they're hiding behind a movement is really what that is.
Or they're getting lumped together. Like,
exactly.
There's a whole kind of probably bucket of things that are going on there. Like the term feminism it was probably a label that was given, not it was probably given to the movement and not necessarily claimed by the movement. I mean, now it has been. But I loved when you said the masculine moves things, because immediately what came to my mind was that the feminine birth thing, and not just women giving birth, but like the creativity and the power of. And even if you've ever been in labor, it's waves. It ebbs and flows. It ebbs and flows. It ebbs, and that is exactly. And it contracts, and so like that ebb and flow is the work. It is the work of birthing that child, just ebbing and flowing, because after it's done, you're never back where you were. You're just slightly forward as to where you are trying to be, which is, obviously the birth of the child. And we replicate that in our daily lives. Things ebb and they flow, but it's all growth. Ebb and flow, we move forward. We ebb and flow, we move forward. And that's where creativity comes from. That's where new ideas come from. That's where, I would be willing to take a bet, like all the best, most brilliant ideas that have ever been had were probably had like in the shower, or doing something where maybe someone's meditating, or they're literally like turning it off, and that's when the idea comes. Like that's what people say all the time. Like I have my best ideas in the showers. Do you know why? Because like you're not doing anything, right? You're just washing your hair, or like soaking up your body. Like the only thing you're doing is just caring for yourself at that moment, and you let yourself go just enough for the ideas to come through.
We're going to end the show on my favorite topic, which is spiritually connecting with your higher self. It very often happens when you're in the shower or when you're in a daydream place, because your subconscious mind comes forward. That's where really all the best ideas come in. And you can do it when you're outside of the shower. Finding 3 minutes to stare at a wall is absolutely going to let your conscious mind take a back seat, let the subconscious mind, or the feminine, birth the idea. The conscious comes in, grabs it, and then runs in the physical with it. So brilliant display of we definitely covered many ways in which the masculine and feminine work well together and actually are in need of each other. And we'll definitely put that as our show title next week. We'll get into that more and more, one of my favorite topics. So, everyone, this is Downward Dogma. We're here every Tuesday, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We are with the podcast network, Third Eye Political Radio. Check us out. Search us on any major podcast app. You'll find a slew of shows. Also check out our sister station, Heart Over Ego Radio, where we have a slew of shows over there in the spiritual realm. We appreciate you, and we are so glad that you visited with us. Check all of our archived episodes on any podcast app. Again, that's Third Eye Political Radio, and we appreciate